When we refer to APA style in our writing, it's not meant to confuse. It's meant to do just the opposite. It's meant to provide a clear, concise way for you to write so that your meaning is always understandable. And that's why there's the rules on where to put the comma and the semicolon and how to cite your material. It's not an unknown thing, it's a very well-known thing. In fact, let's just start with APA. It stands for the American Psychological Association, and it's designed simply to make writing clearer. I'm right at the apastyle.org site right now, and if you take a look at it, you'll see there's lots of information on how you can find things out. There's lots about APA style. You can take a look at, there's frequently asked questions. If you slide over here, and you can take a look at various things. How do you reference material, whatever, punctuation, grammar, and writing style. There's lots of things to look at there. What I'm going to do now is I've condensed some of the main points and I've put them into steps like this, and I've also put them into a document so we can see what they look like. Let's take a look at that. APA highlights, these were updated from 2010 right from the website. It says Times New Roman font and 12-point size, so there should be no confusion. If you take a look at the document, there it is. It's Times New Roman, 12-point. There's no confusion. There's no other options. Second thing, 1-inch margin on all sides. So let's take a look at the document again, and the margins, of course, are all around the sides here. If I were to go up to page layout and click on margins, you'll see that it's actually called normal in Microsoft Word. One all the way around, and that's what will give you this nice look, and it's also something students should be able to find instantly. Let's go to the next one. Double spacing. That includes your references and stuff like that. Let's take a look at double spacing. These are double spaced. This is double spaced. And I'm going to talk about one of the differences here in a second, but it should be double spaced. Indent paragraphs 5 spaces. And no blank line between paragraphs, just indent. So if we're double spacing, if we left a blank space between them when we did that, we'd end up with this huge piece of real estate here where there is nothing. So that's why they tell us, okay, we're going to double space it so we don't leave a blank line between paragraphs. We use an indent. Now the indent at the very beginning of a section is optional. You can have this if you want. It's pretty obvious this is where this paragraph starts. But to be totally correct, you would have that indented that far. Let's take a look at the next. 2 spaces after periods. Okay, now we have options of 1 space or 2 space, and for most writing it just has to be consistent. It doesn't matter what you do, but for clarity, and there are times when especially when you're using abbreviations, where that 1 space after period can cause a lot of confusion. APA simply says 2 spaces after period, and that is how it has to be. Now once again, students, if you go over to your Office button, click down to your Word options, and then take a look at the proofing, you'll find that underneath the settings that you have right here, you can click on it, and you'll see right away it says comma required before last list item, which of course is mandatory. That's the serial comma. That should be put to always. Punctuation required, of course, don't worry about that, but space required between sentences. Click on the 2, and it'll automatically look after it for you. The next thing to consider, leave the right margins ragged. Do not justify the text. So let's take a look at the example. See how this is ragged here? We'll ignore that for a second. It's ragged here. Footnotes or endnotes are permissible. Now there are sometimes profs will lead you to think that footnotes aren't to be used. They can be used, but only for one specific purpose, and that is content explanation. You would never use a footnote or an endnote for reference in your material. References belong at the end of your document. But if you want to explain something in content, in fact, I encourage students to do this quite a bit. This particular quote we're using here has a footnote. So we're talking about DPMO. We go down here to the footnote, and it tells us that's defects per million opportunities. It's important for me as a professor to understand that you understand. So when you're throwing in some terminology, I love to have my students explain what they mean by it. So in their own words, so that I know that they know it. It can be done inside the paragraph if there's room and if it's logical, but you can't go explaining every little point you put in. But when you use a term, why not give us an explanation in a footnote? Okay, citations are inline and they include at least the author and the date. Okay, so inline citations are part of APA. Let's take a look at that example. Over here, here's an inline citation. This sentence I gathered from information I read in this particular document, written by Clark in 2004. So I'll zip down here, find the prof, and I will look down. Oh, there's Clark, 2004. There's the name of the document and whatever other information I want to use. Now, if you're quoting a very specific part out of him, you would include the page number as well. And once again, in Word, we have this option. You can edit the citation and you can include a page number. So let's just say it's page 85 to 86, and you hit OK, and there you go. Clark wraps around the page here, but that's fine. Clark 2004, page 85 to 86. Now this is the author, the date. Over here, this particular one, this was a website. It didn't have an author identified on there. So in that case, you would identify it with the name of the website. You have no other choice, but that's how that one's done. Page numbers. They're on the right side of the page. That's all there is to it. Now, whether they're on the top of the page or the bottom of the page is up to you, but they're on the right side of the page, and that's just how it is. I made these numbers quite big. Now notice that it will appear on the page of the table of contents. It will not appear on the first page, and also note in APA style, this title page is considered page 1. If I click there, you can see in the bottom it says it is page 1. I click on here, it'll say it's page 2 and so on. Although there's no page number here, this is page 1. So your table of contents and things, or your executive summary, will be on page 2 or page 3, depending how long it is. And then your document material, your actual text will start on the next one, page 3 or 4, depending, of course, how much information you have before that. And here's just a reference to that again. The title page is considered page 1. Quotations, you go into quotation marks and things, but if they're over 40 words, should be in its own paragraph with justified text, and both margins of that paragraph will be indented 5 spaces. Let's take a quick look. This is an example right here. This was a quote from Kim Tasca. So, all right, here's the quote. It's indented 5 spaces there, and it's indented 5 spaces here. Great, and it is justified. Now I've made it italic. That is optional. There's no rule saying you have to. You can do it if you want, but it's still double spaced. But you will notice in terms of spacing, you do have a blank line at the top of it and a blank line at the bottom of it. You do separate it from your paragraph that way. Of course, you don't do that between these paragraphs, but when you have a quoted piece, you do separate it that way. And that's mentioned right here. So if you're taking a look at a heading 1, there's a blank line, as well as this quotation paragraph we just spoke about. Let's take a look at that. So the blank line there, the blank line there, but also here is the heading 1. There's one blank line after it. Heading 1, one blank line after it. Reference section begins on a new page. Quite often I get a student will find out that he has lots of extra room here. Why not start my reference there? There's only 10 references, but it should be on its next page. Now again, you're not wasting paper for most of the professors here, because we're looking at an electronic copy of it anyway, so don't worry about that. But the references, notice this title is there centered. It's a heading 1 title, and there's one blank line after it, and then we have our reference material there. References should use hanging indents. That is the way that the top line goes across here, and when there's more information, it wraps over, but this is indented by those 5 spaces. And if I were to type more again, it would indent again, and it would stay in a line here. The only time the hanging indent will pop out is when I have a new beginning. So very easily you can find them: Blake, Brown, Clark, on and on and on. Titles for tables go on top, and titles for figures go below. So just remember this: if you're putting a figure into your document or a table into your document, Look at all the T's. Titles for tables on top. So just remember that. If you're putting a title on your table, it goes on top of the table. Anything else will go below. Each appendix opens on its new page. I don't have an appendix in my particular document here, but Appendix A will start on, whatever, page 15, and maybe it's only half a page long. Then you have Appendix B. Appendix B must be on the next page, page 16. All the appendices should be on their own page. And all spelling must be in Canadian English. You may need to get a dictionary for that, but Canadian English, unless of course you're quoting someone else's work. You're quoting someone from Germany or someone from the States and they maybe spell it differently or use a different term. That's fine, but that will be within quotes. The stuff that you are presenting to me needs to be in Canadian English. So there you go. There's a quick look at the rules of APA styles, and I hope this helps you.